Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Mike, I'm one of the tutors for the Diploma in Business and Management courses, and this session today is going to look at the concept of leadership. This is particularly relevant for those of you doing Level 6 Strategic Management and Level 7 Strategic Planning. We're going to look today at the roles of management, the concepts of management and leadership, the qualities required of a successful manager and a successful leader, and different styles of leadership and their impact. It's difficult to define exactly what management is. What do we mean by that term? And more complicated in a way is the definition of leadership. Many would agree that managers are there to get things done, and leaders are there to forge the way ahead. It can be argued that the two roles overlap a great deal, and this is indeed the case. But in principle, we should look at management and leadership as being two slightly different roles, one blending into the other. Let's for a moment just consider management. We can think of management as consisting of a number of different roles. Here are some of the examples of that. For planning, this involves setting objectives and looking at strategies, policies, programs and procedures for achieving the objectives. Planning might be done by a variety of different managers. Line managers, for example, who are responsible for performance. However, advice for planning may also come from staff management, who have expertise in that particular area, even if they have no line authority. For example, a production manager may carry out workforce planning in the production department, but use the skills of the HR manager in planning recruitment for vacancies, for example. With organising, managers will set tasks which need to be performed if the business is to achieve its objectives. Jobs need to be organised within sections or departments, and authority needs to be delegated so that the jobs are carried out effectively. Again, considering a manufacturing company, it may need to produce quality goods that will be delivered to customers on time. The tasks such as manufacturing, packaging, administration, etc., that are part of the producing and distributing goods need to be organised to achieve that goal. Commanding. This involves giving instructions to others to carry out their tasks. And the manager has the authority to make decisions and the responsibility to see that these tasks are carried out. With coordinating, you're bringing together the activities of the people within the business. Individuals and groups will have their own specific goals, which may be different to those of the business and to each other. And management must make sure that there is a common approach so that the company's goals are achieved. And lastly on this list, controlling. Managers will measure and correct the activities of individuals and groups to make sure that their performance fits in with the organisational plans. A good example of management in action is the principle of management by objectives. Now, this was first referred to by Peter Drucker in his book, The Practice of Management, back in the 50s. And he looked at the operations of management as a series of categories: setting objectives for the organisation, organising the work, motivating the employees, measuring the job, and delivering people, bringing out the talent in people. Now, his approach suggests that employers and employees need to work to shared objectives based on a mission statement and corporate aims of the business. If they didn't, then different sections of the business would work independently and differently, and the result could well be chaotic. Drucker argued that businesses need to set out clear objectives, make plans that would enable those objectives to be realized, implement those plans, and then monitor and evaluate the objectives to make sure that they've been achieved. There are disadvantages and advantages to this system. The advantages of management by objectives is that employees can be motivated to perform at improved levels once clear objectives have been made apparent and agreed upon. Employees and managers know their objectives, so they work to a single purpose. The objectives and the plans can be coordinated throughout the organization, which means that different business functions will know what other functions are doing. And management by objectives helps senior managers to have a much clearer system of controlling the direction and performance of the business. However, there are problems. It may be unresponsive to changing conditions. Managing by objectives may not work in that case. The time involved in setting up mission statements, corporate objectives, and so on may be too lengthy. And as a result, managers may not be responding to new challenges quickly enough. Management by objective assumes that all people in the business have the same goals and interests. However, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that people have different approaches to work, and that this wouldn't necessarily be the case. A young, enthusiastic manager developed through a company's graduate training scheme, perhaps, may be optimistic and go-getting when it comes to approach to work. However, a longer-standing employee may not have quite the same enthusiasm and might find that this new approach isn't as successful, and he may resent it. And finally, it has been suggested that management by objective only works if you know the objectives clearly. But in many businesses, that may not be the case. It may not be as simple as that. The individual roles of managers are something that we should look at in detail. Henry Mintzberg suggested that, as well as carrying out certain functions, the manager also fulfills defined roles within a business. And there are these three key roles that he chose as being the important ones. The interpersonal roles arise from the manager's formal authority. Managers have a figurehead role. A large part of the chief executive's time, for example, is spent representing the company at conferences and dinners and meetings and so on. But they also have a significant leader role, of course, which involves hiring, firing, training staff, motivating employees, and so on. Thirdly, they have a liaison role. Some managers will spend up to half their time meeting with other managers. They do this because they need to know what is happening in other departments, and they need to be aware of what is going on. Senior managers spend a great deal of time with people outside the business. And Mintzberg felt that these contacts build up an informal information system and a means of extending influence both within and outside the business. In terms of information, managers act as channels of information from one department to another. They are in a position to do this because of their contacts. And in the decision-making role, the manager's formal authority and access to information means that no one else is in a better position to make decisions about a department's work. Mintzberg drew certain conclusions from the work of managers. The idea that a manager is a systematic planner is a myth. Planning is often carried out on a day-to-day basis in between more urgent tasks. Another myth is that a manager has no regular or routine duties, as these are mostly delegated to others. Mintzberg found, on the contrary, that managers perform a number of routine duties, particularly what he referred to as ceremonial tasks. And his research showed that managers prefer verbal communication rather than a formal system of communication. Information passed by word of mouth in an informal way is likely to be more up to date and easier to grasp. If we turn to leadership, we can see that these ideas can be enhanced. The concept of leadership becomes more significant. The ability to lead within an organization is of growing interest in businesses, resulting in a need to lead companies through change brought about by an increase in competition and changes in technology and economic conditions, for example. The leadership role is an important one. To be a good leader in business, it suggested that a manager must know what direction needs to be taken by the business and plan how to achieve this at all times. Leaders should also be able to persuade others that the decisions they have taken are the correct ones. Leaders are often thought to be charismatic people who have something about them, a certain spark in their personality, whatever it may be, that makes them stand out from others. It has been argued that there are certain specific personality traits that are common to leaders. However, studies have failed really to identify these. In order to identify leadership as such, studies have shifted to examine what leaders, and in particular managers, do. That is what behavior is associated with leadership. And let's have a look at the types of behavior that they will exhibit. Leaders have a responsibility to achieve tasks set for them with the help of the groups that they lead. Hersey and Blanchard refer to the fact that leadership occurs when one attempts to influence the behavior of an individual or group. And therefore leaders have two main roles: to make sure that a task or goal is achieved, and to maintain effective relationships within the organization, including the relationship between the leader and other group members. Effectiveness can be measured in terms of the way in which relationships enable tasks or goals to be achieved. There are two dimensions we can look at for leadership behavior: initiating structure, which means setting out the ways and means of accomplishing group goals and coordinating activities of the group members, and consideration, where motivating group members to accept group goals and to work together at achieving the group tasks is important while maintaining good relationships. Coming back to Hersey and Blanchard, they identified three general skills of leadership. Diagnosing is the ability to understand the situation as it is now and know what can reasonably be expected in the future. The gap between what is and what is now and what can be expected is often referred to as the performance gap and is a problem to be solved for leaders. The effective leader will find ways of closing this gap, and diagnosing this is a cognitive skill. Adapting is changing one's behavior and other resources in ways that help to close the performance gap. And adapting is a behavioral skill. Communicating, since diagnosis and adaptation are not sufficient unless one can get across what needs to be done and how it can be done, communication becomes a very important skill, and this is a process skill.